Welcome to another episode of Me and My Health Up. I'm your host, Anthony Hartcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today, I'm going to be doing just that for you. I'm essentially going to be sharing me and my wellness routine, which is what I do. So, as a practicing clinical nutritionist, I walk the talk, so to speak. And so I'm going to be sharing some of the insights into what I do on a daily basis to keep me going and to keep my energies high and my spirits high, my mood high, and live a fulfilling life. And by starting, I'm human. So yes, I'm not looking to do everything perfectly. And that's the other thing about health. It's not about perfection. So I want you to understand that, because perfectionism isn't possible. And if you have this idealization as to where you should be in terms of your health and whatnot, and, because this person can do this, why can't I do that, and all that sort of thing, and how come, I don't look the way they do, and all this, all these things of jealousy and comparison, that's not healthy. So perfectionism is not what you're pursuing. It's just constant and never-ending self-improvement is what you want to be achieving, aspiring for. And it's something that I'm always looking to do, is how can I improve myself? And it's not just on a physical plane. I'm also looking to do it on a spiritual and mental plane. So I look at that all-embodiedness of wellness, and hence why I talk about a wellness routine as opposed to just health. It's more fulfilling. It's more holistic, so to speak. I want to start with sharing the principles of which I set my parameters around my well-being. And the first one is prioritization. That is key. I often hear people say, I just don't have the time. I don't know how you find the time. How do you find the time to fit all that in with everything else that's going on and all this? And you constantly hear these excuses as to why people can't live a healthy life because, there's so much to do. But life's not all about doing. I often, I guess it depends on where the person's at, but it really comes down to prioritization. So, I can obviously go on a tangent here and talk about the to-do list versus being and experiencing life. But I'm not going to jump into that tangent just yet. I'm going to talk about setting priorities around your health. So the way I look at it is it's non-negotiable. It is, a cornerstone of my day is health. And that begins with a regular nightly routine, a regular morning routine, and prioritizing exercise. Exercise is always there, no matter what I'm doing. If I'm traveling, I remember catching planes at 6 a.m. in the morning. I'd be out running at 3:30 or 4 a.m. to get a run in because I knew I'd be traveling all day. So that's how important exercise is in my healthy regime or wellness regime. So it really comes down to making it a priority. If it's not a priority, it doesn't get done. As you know, you'll get everything done that's a priority. Like getting the kids ready for school is a priority, and it gets done. Achieving that work task or that work deadline, it gets done because it's a priority. Well, it's the same as health. It won't get done unless it's a priority. So make it a priority to you. Put your well-being first, because then you can better serve others. If you're not at the top of your game, how can you help others? If your mental health is poor, how can you possibly, support others? It's a struggle in doing so. But if you're at the top of your game in terms of your health, you can do more for others. You can serve others better. You'll end up making better career choices, relationship choices. You'll make better decisions overall if you're in a healthy state of mind. And that when I say health, it is that element of balance as well. So it's finding that nice balance to you. And again, this comes down to an individualistic it can only be found on that personal level. So obviously what my balance is, it could be different to your balance because it depends on everyone's makeup and constitution is different. So if, I might be able to handle a bit more pressure, but that's my constitution. Some people can handle a lot of pressure, and then others can't. But that's just the individual, and so it does come. There's an element of individuality here. So don't get hung up on what I'm doing that you should be doing. I'm not. That's what this podcast episode is not about. That this podcast episode is just to share what I'm doing and these principles, so that I guess you understand how I fit everything in what I do to remain healthy, and how I live a healthy life. But it doesn't mean that this is going to work for you. So it is just me sharing what works for me. It may or may not work for you. But prioritization is key no matter who you are. So if you don't prioritize your health, you won't be healthy, full stop. So it needs to be a priority. It's got to be the cornerstone. And look, if you don't value health, you probably won't be listening to this podcast. But, if health is not a value to someone, it's not important, it's not going to happen anyway, right? So it's got to be a key cornerstone value as well. And it is for me, obviously, and I think it is for you if you're listening to this podcast. You wouldn't listen to a health podcast if health wasn't a core value of yours. So establishing those priorities, and I establish them around making sure that I have a regular nighttime routine, like I mentioned before, and that is I have a regular to bedtime. Okay, so I have a set in stone bedtime, and yes, there is flexibility. So if I were to share what my bedtime is, it's typically around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and you're probably thinking, "Oh, wow, that's early." And yes, it is early, but it works for me, right? It might not work for you. And, I'm not rigid about it either. So obviously if there's an important occasion and it's a dinner function, most dinner functions don't work for me because, they start at 7:30 and you're just finishing the first course at 8:30, and that's my bedtime. So, but I obviously don't approach this with this rigid mindset. I have a flexible mindset because attending that function could be important to someone else, or it could be important to me. And that also needs to be weighed into the overall health balance, because if it's important to me, or it's important to my friend or my family member, then that's something that I also value. So I obviously have a pillar around health I also value family. I value friendships. And friendships and family are part of my fabric in terms of my healthy well-being. So that they're one of my pillars of my well-being. So what are my pillars? My pillars are, and there's no priority around this, I do them all, right? So I essentially eat well, I sleep well, I do practice mindfulness, and I'll share the forms of mindfulness I practice. I actually don't meditate. And, well, you could say some of my forms of mindfulness may be considered meditation, but that's not the point. And I also, one of the pillars of my health are relationships. And I mentioned exercise, I think I did. But anyway, there's 5 there. So they're all pillars of my health. And I guess the point I was making was, yes, I'm not rigid around sleep, because if I were, then sleep would get a big tick, but relationships would fall down because I'm letting someone down by not attending that nighttime function. You get what I mean? So it is important that you find this balance that works for you. So, that's where I just compromise my nightly routine. But I must say, if I apply that 80-20 rule, 80% of the time I am sticking to that 8:30, 9 o'clock bedtime. And that works for me. And yes, I do have exemptions when I go and watch my Parramatta Eels team play footy, or a lot of the games I watch on TV are at night time. So I have to break my rules in order to cheer my team along. But that's only once a week, and it might be every fortnight or once a month. It's not, it's not every night. So majority of the night, 80% of my nights would be sticking to that bedtime. So that's really important. And then I prioritize the wind down to that. So I'm really touching on this sleep pillar now, and also touching on my healthy routine. So in order to fall asleep at 8:30 to 9 o'clock, I need to be winding the body down. If I go to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock without any wind down, and this can happen after a footy game, right? Because I'm pumped up, right? Particularly if my team's had a good game, I don't expect to put my head on the pillow and fall asleep. If I expected that, it means I'm really exhausted and I haven't been looking after myself, right? So in order to fall asleep, you need to have a wind down. So a lead up to your sleep time. So if your sleep time could be 10 p.m., then you want to be allowing 2 hours of winding down and getting the body ready for sleep. And that includes dimming the lights or, just reducing the amount of exposure your eyes are to white lights, blue lights. So that's really important. It's important that you don't do anything stimulating. So if you get stimulated by looking at text messages or reading emails or, work is obviously a stimulant. So I allow 2 hours from that in order to fall asleep. But as I said, there are exceptions when I've got to meet deadlines. I may be working a little bit later than normal, and I'll probably go to bed a little bit later than normal. But what I'm saying is that's not the norm. The norm is that I have this good 2 hours, and that 2 hours is making sure I eat at least 2 hours before going to bed to allow the food to digest. If you don't allow that time, then your heart rate's going to be elevated because it's going to be moving nutrients around in your body from the food. That's its job, to get the nutrients to cells, and that's what happens after eating. So I don't want, in order to fall asleep, you have to have your heart rate dropping. And obviously having food to digest doesn't help that process. So I make sure at least 2 hours, and I don't have a heavy meal at nighttime. It's definitely one of my lightest meals at night. So I always avoid, if I overeat at night, I really wear the consequences of overeating at night. So certainly have a lighter meal at night. What's the point of having large amount of calories at night? Well, I guess there are exemptions to this. Athletes, for example, they need, in order just to fuel their body the next day, they need to obviously consume so many calories per day. So they're probably an exemption to what I'm saying. But most people are just going to sleep and just sort of getting up for work and live a sort of more sedentary life. You don't need a lot of calories before you sleep. Your body doesn't need them. Your body's more likely to store them as opposed to utilizing them. You're best to consume calories in the morning and around midday. So that morning part of the day is the best time to consume calories because that's when we're most needing our energy. We don't need it at nighttime unless you are on night shift. Obviously, that is another exemption. Or if you're going out to dance and party all night, well, then again, it's not the end of your day, really. It's probably just the start of your day. But anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked. So it's very important to eat at least 2 hours before going to bed. The earlier, the better. Also to wind down. So I always just do things that calm me. So I have my shower that calms my nervous system. I generally have a cold shower. I find that really, as much as it sort of wakes you up, it calms you down quickly after. So you sort of get that little spurt of wake up, and then all of a sudden you're calm because it drops your body temperature. And that's the other core thing about getting a good night's sleep. Your core body temperature needs to drop. Okay. And that won't happen if you're metabolizing food or if you're expending energy. Okay. If you're expending energy, like doing activity at night. So if you're doing HIIT workouts at nighttime, you're going to need more time to wind down. Because that's elevating your core temperature. So your core body temperature does need to drop, and hence that cold shower can help that process. Also, making sure that the ambient temperature around you is ultimately around that 18 to 20 degrees is what the science says about the best temperature to have a good night's sleep. And I certainly find that if the ambient temperature is elevated in my room, I'm more restless, and my Aura ring will tell me so all the time. So, I collect data on my sleep, and I found that through if the temperature in the room's hot, I'm restless, I don't get a good night's sleep. So you do need to make sure the house is at a nice temperature around that 18 to 20 degrees to get that core body temperature down. So that's also important. As I said, limiting your eyes to light exposure is really important. Your eyes need to start seeing darkness in order for the body to start making melatonin, which is key for a good night's sleep. You want to be building up, and it takes time for the body to build up melatonin. Don't think that the minute you turn off your devices or your blue lights or your white lights that your body's going to have enough melatonin to help you sleep, have a good night's sleep. That's not true. It takes time to manufacture things, right? It takes time to manufacture an iPhone or a computer or whatever it might, it does take, our body's the same thing. It utilizes resources and manufactures things for us. And one of these things it manufactures is our nighttime hormone, melatonin. So allow time for melatonin to be produced. That's very important. And sticking to a regular routine, because by having a regular routine, it actually sends signals to the brain that, this is what happens, or this is what follows this routine, right? So my body knows, if it has a shower, it does some, stretches. I do a bit of stretching on the foam roller and things like that, and just limbering out a bit, feeling good. That's sending signals to my brain that, hey, it's nighttime. It's time to start, producing these sleep hormones that I need to have a good restful night's sleep. So that's really, really important, is you stick to the same routine, because that will really work for you. Okay. So that's a must. It's so important. It just sends the right signals to the body. I at the same time as I'm foam rolling and things like that, I will also jot things down that are ruminating, that I'm turning over and over in my head. So these ruminating thoughts that I'm not solving, I'm not doing anything about, because I can't call someone or whatever to help solve that problem. Then I put it on paper. That's something I do tomorrow. I'm not going to solve it overnight. Yes, you do. You may, if you're stewing on something, you may resolve it overnight, and as a consequence, your sleep's probably going to be affected as a result of doing that. I generally put all my thoughts on paper. That really helps clear my mind. You want to have a mind that's not actively thinking. And in order to avoid that active thinking, I think writing things down really helps. The research shows that. They did a comparable study of those that wrote things down for a period before bed, and those that didn't, and those that did, obviously, they got a better night's sleep. So the science is there to support it as well. So that's part of my routine. That is what I do. And that's really essentially my night. I obviously like looking at nature in the evening. So I will be looking outside. I will be looking up at the moon. I'll be looking at the sun setting, all those sort of things, looking at the bats flying around. I find that's really calming for me. So that works well for me too, is observing nature. So that's part of my routine at night. I do that. And I actually utilize some sleeping herbs. So I must say I've had to really work on my sleep. It's been something I've needed to work at. And so I do, rely on some herbs to also help relax me at nighttime. Herbal teas is probably what I'm referring to here. I have a little herbal concoction that I have, and that helps calm me as well. So that's pretty much my nightly routine. And as a result of that, I get a good night's sleep. I wake up at the same time. Well, when I say go to bed and wake up at the same time, it's within an hour. So going to bed is, there's an hour time frame in which I go to bed, and that's somewhere between probably either 8 or 9 or 8:30, 9:30. It sort of varies a little bit, but it's generally within that time frame. And waking up is about the same. It's sort of that 5:30, 6:30. Could be sort of maybe 6 to 7. So it varies a little, but it's generally very consistent. So I'm not sleeping in, and I'm regularly not going to bed late. So that's really consistent, and that's really important. That's fundamental to getting good, consistent night's sleep. And that's what it's all about, being consistent about your sleeping routine. So that's the area of sleep pillar. I think in terms of another health principle, getting back to away from the pillars and more to the health principles, another one I live by is consistency. And starting small. So I didn't achieve this nightly routine overnight. I worked at it and just changed, tweaked small things over time, and it gradually built up to where it is today. So don't think I'm doing this just overnight. So don't think you need to do this all overnight. Just take one thing from this podcast episode and implement that. Make that consistent once that's consistent in your routine, then go to the next thing. That really works. I find that really works. It's worked for me over the years. So start small and be consistent is another one of those cornerstones of my well-being. I mentioned holistic health, so that was another cornerstone. And the other one I wanted to mention around this is standards. I always set myself standards. And look, I strive towards them. If I achieve them, that's great. If I don't, it doesn't matter, but I'm working towards it. Okay, so I've been working towards getting so much sleep, improving the quality of sleep, and I work towards it, but I don't always achieve it, and that's fine. I'm still going in that direction. I'm still doing things that improve the sleep quality. But it's not perfect. I don't have perfect night's sleep. I do have that occasionally bad night, but then I'm thinking back as to what may have driven that. What can I improve to make it better? So it's that constant and never-ending improving attitude that I have towards my health. It's not perfectionism. I don't want to be. I actually think it's boring. I actually think if everything's perfect, how boring would it be? I think the spice of life is the variety, and the variation is what makes it enjoyable. So actually, I used to be a perfectionist, but I've let go of that a long time ago, and that's really served me well. So don't pursue perfectionism. Don't pursue what others are doing. So don't necessarily adopt what I'm doing because you're completely different. You've got to find what works for you, and that's going to be a bit of trial and error. I can certainly put forward recommendations based on science, and what the research says. However, some may work, some may not, because everyone's different, right? It's not one size fits all. So this is, that's an important thing to this talk. And the other thing around standards is with exercise, I put aside that time to exercise. My time is important. I value my time. So my exercise is not half-hearted. I say, well, I've got this time. I'm going to make the most of this time whilst I have it aside for exercise. So I give it 100%. Look, I might not live up to what I wanted to get out of that workout each time, but I do my best with what I've got. And it does vary. Obviously, if you have a bad night's sleep or if you're not eating well, your performance, your output's going to be varied. It's not going to be, consistently great like it normally is, right? So you need to understand that. And particularly if, you're getting over some illness, then, you need to lower the benchmark. Obviously, you don't want to be pursuing that same benchmark as if you're healthy. And so it's, I have a standard. When I train to the best of my ability. That's probably the best way to frame it. To the best of my ability, to the best in terms of what I can output at that given point in time. I don't do it half-heartedly, and I don't sort of think, I'd rather be doing this or whatever. I'm there to train, and I train. And so that I think you need to hold yourself to account that you've dedicated that time away from your family, away from your friends, away from something else. Make it work, okay? Make it work for you. So set yourself a standard around how you're going to go about your training. So it does. This comes down to mindset, the mindset. So the mindset I have is that if I've committed to something, I'm going to do it with everything I've got. Okay, I'm not going to give it, a half-hearted attempt. What's the point? I'm wasting my time. Life's precious. Time's precious. Okay, so. Getting back to my health pillars, so I talked about sleep before. I'm going to get on to diet, and as I said, these are not in order of priority. I just do them all, right? I don't. So sleep's always there, right? Diet's always going to be there. So, as I said when I was talking about sleep and not eating much at night, I eat more in the morning. So obviously, because I'm not eating much at night, I actually have a good appetite in the morning, and I consume a solid breakfast, and it fuels me. It really does. I don't get cravings for snacks. I pretty much get hungry again at lunchtime, and that can vary between 12, well, it could be 11:30 to 1:30 is sort of my time for eating lunch. I eat breakfast around 7 to 8. So consistently around that 7 to 8, maybe 6:30 to 7, depending on what I've got on. That's what I eat in the morning. I generally move my bowels in the morning. That's a ritual of mine, and I really feel so much better if I move my bowels in the morning. My day doesn't work out as well if I haven't. So I actually make it a priority. As much as, it's not nice talking about this subject, it is a priority for me, because I know with, consistent bowel motions, you feel great, as you know yourself, right? When you're consistent with your bowel motions, you feel better within your body, because they're toxins that need to get out of the body, right? You don't want a buildup of toxins in the body. It's going to affect your overall performance. So having regular bowel motions is important. I prioritize that. So I have a slow morning. If I have a fast morning and I'm rushing, of course, that bowel motion's not going to come. All right. I know that. I need to be in a relaxed state in order to move my bowels. And so if you're frustrated, you're not moving your bowels and you struggle, and it may be because you're too hectic in the morning. You might need to come up with a better morning routine. It may require waking up a little bit earlier to give yourself more time to have a slower start. So that might be the key, and that may mean going to bed a little bit earlier at night time. So you might need to shift it a little bit, give yourself an extra half an hour in the morning, as opposed to being under the pump to deadlines. So deadlines are stressful for the body, and that's going to result in the body holding on. It's not in a relaxed state to let go. So I really suggest, if you like and prefer, like I do, to move your bowels in the morning, to have a slow morning. I'm very consistent around my slow mornings. I think it frustrates my wife because I'm operating at a slow pace, and I really am a stickler to getting my bowels out, or not my bowels out, but obviously the feces out of my bowels. So anyway, I won't talk too much about this subject, but that's important, and I make sure that happens by having a slow morning, and I allow the time to have a slow morning. And so I will generally schedule meetings to later, so I'm not having early meetings generally. But as I said, I'm not rigid. I am flexible, so if it means having to fit in with others, I'll flex. But again, I won't compromise my 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of the time, I'm having slow mornings. I love it. I don't exercise in the morning. I do a bit of movement in the morning. I don't call it exercise, because it's just moving my body, and that's walking the kids to school. That's part of my routine. I help them get breakfast, so that my morning is giving. It's not all about me. I'm supporting my kids to get ready for school. I take them to school, so yes, I do that. And at the same time, I'm also looking after myself. I have breakfast. I don't skip breakfast, right? And I know, some people do, and they might be doing it for all sorts of reasons, but I generally do not, because I know it really helps fuel me for the day. And it sets me up. It sets me up with the energy I need to get through the day. And it works really well for me. But again, everyone's different. So then I guess after I, drop my kids to school, I'm, working. So I'm consulting, seeing clients, producing content like I am right now. But during my day, the course of my day, I'm also having quiet periods where I'm just taking a break. And that is just stepping outside, getting some fresh air, looking into the sky, observing the birds, observing nature, feeling the wind. I just do these things just to ground me. That's important, particularly if I've had a stressful call, a stressful meeting or something like that. Then I'll need to do something that grounds me in order to get me in the most resourceful state for the next meeting or the next encounter. So that's generally reconnecting with nature for me, getting a bit of sunshine on my face, feeling the ground, feeling the breeze, as I said, and observing the birds. That's what I do, observe flowers. I just zone out for a period, and that's my mindfulness. And I do that, I sprinkle that in throughout the day. I'll also do some breathing, some deep breathing from time to time, just to keep myself calm and in a more resourceful state to better respond to situations. So that's how I manage. And as a result of that, my digestive system is working well. So when you're constantly stressed, and you'll find this, when you're busy throughout the day, you will not feel like eating. You'll basically just think, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry. And yeah, you'll end up not eating the whole day, and then you'll get home and you'll relax as soon as you walk in the door, and your body's thinking, wow, I need some fuel. I've burnt so much, I've expended so much, I haven't had the right amount of protein to rebuild and restore. Give it to me now. And this is when your mind's going, quick food, I need energy, I need, and you might go to snacks, and you'll eat a lot. And this is where I find, these people that are busy all day have a switch off digestive system that only turns on at night, and it's why they eat too much at night. And that's why they're coming to me saying, I just eat too much at night and I'm starting to see it. I'm not looking as I used to look. So that's the worst time to eat calories. And so this is why it's important. And this is why I've talked a bit about mindfulness. And this is how everything's interconnected, right? So if you have a bad night's sleep, it's also going to drive this craving for highly calorific food and high GI food. So that's sugary food. You're going to get those cravings if you had a poor night's sleep, because the brain likes to work off glucose. It wants glucose in your blood, and it's going to make sure you put glucose in the blood in order to serve its ability to operate well. So, so that's a poor night's sleep will compromise your eating the next day. And now what I'm saying is, if you don't practice mindfulness throughout the day and sprinkle it in, you are also going to affect your ability to feel hungry. You'll affect your ability to digest the food and to harness the energy from the food, right? It's going to be compromised. Your digestive system's going to be compromised, and you don't want that, okay? So you need to do mindfulness that works for you throughout the day. It's not just running from, and it could be putting spaces between meetings. I do that. I deliberately do that, because I want some downtime, and I want the most out of that meeting. I want to give that next meeting, that next consultation, everything I've got. I want to be in the best state of mind, the best state of wellness. That's why I spread out my day. I don't cram it, and I do mindfulness throughout the day. That gives me optimal digestion, and I eat the calories when they should be consumed, and that's during daylight hours. So that breakfast, what do I have for breakfast? It's typically having a oat and walnut loaf, which contains nuts, seeds, oats. I put lots of berries on it, and a bit of coconut yogurt, as well as what else do I add? It's got some cinnamon and spices in it. I've been adding fresh chili to it recently, so you might think, oh, that's a bit weird, but I enjoy the variety, and that's one thing that I mentioned earlier. I love variety. So that's what I have for breakfast, and I enjoy that. That gets me through to lunch. If I feel hungry earlier, then I'll generally have maybe a bit of fruit or some water. I do drink consistently throughout the day. So what am I drinking? I'm drinking water, I'm drinking herbal teas. That's all throughout the day. Yes, I have a morning coffee. Yes, I'm human. Coffee's, I'm not, no coffee and none of this and none of that. I'm human. I love my coffee. And I always have a morning coffee. Am I hooked on coffee? No. I choose it because I like it. And I just have the one in the morning. I've worked out through my Aura Ring, it doesn't compromise my sleep, because I've had, a good 6 months off it, and I found my sleep quality was still the same with or without it. I just have the one morning coffee, no more, because I know that does tip me over the edge. So I'm disciplined around that, but I enjoy my morning coffee. I love it. So yes, I have one coffee in the morning with my breakfast, and then I'm having a lemon and ginger tea because that helps move my bowels. That's generally what I have in the morning. Snacks, as I said, fruit. I may have a bit of fruit with some nut butter on it to add some protein. Lunch is generally leftovers from the night before. So I'll get to dinner. So it's generally leftover dinner is what I have for lunch. If I don't have leftovers, then I have these seeded crackers, which are awesome. And I put a bit of avocado, a bit of anchovy, like an anchovy on top with a cherry tomato. And that's, pretty much I'll have a few of them, or not a few, probably half a packet of these seeded crackers. As I said, I eat most of my calories at lunch and breakfast. And I sometimes have a protein shake. in the mid-afternoon if I've had a smaller lunch. So I might have that protein shake around mid-afternoon. That's a plant-based protein shake. You'll find I generally gravitate towards plant-based foods, and I'll have more plant-based. And if I'm having meat, I'll generally choose fish. But it's not saying I don't have the occasional red meat, white meat, in terms of chicken or whatever that, could be pork or it could be beef or lamb. I do consume those meats. I don't consume a lot of meat. I more majority plant-based, but that just resonates well with my body. So that's what I found. It's worked over the course of time. Fish works well. Fish and plant protein work really well for me. But yeah, I don't have a lot of red meat or that I guess not meat other than from the sea. So that's So I may in the afternoon I may have this protein shake, and then at dinner it's majority vegetables. So it would be at least 50 to 60% vegetables, sometimes more. And then it could be 80-20, it could be 80% vegetables and 20% as I said, fish, or it could be tofu. That's probably the main ones. And then on the occasion, as I said, it could be a bit of red meat. But it's majority vegetables at night with a bit of protein and sometimes a bit of carbohydrates. I don't eat much carbohydrates at night. I just find I consume enough during the day. I don't need, large amounts of carbohydrates. So the only carbohydrates I consume at night time would be a bit of potato, a bit of sweet potato, maybe a bit of beetroot, a bit of carrots. They're my sort of carbohydrates. I do have pasta, but the pasta is a legume sort of based pasta. It's a non-wheat. It's made up of, grains and legumes. So one of them's with quinoa and rice. And I may have some pasta and some vegetables. But vegetables is the bulk of what I eat at dinner. And that then flows on to lunch the next day. So pretty much my dinner becomes my lunch the next day. So if I really look at from a bird's eye view, I would say I consume most of my calories at breakfast, and then next biggest is lunch, and then it's going downhill from there. But in saying that, if I have a very active day, then the calorie consumption will be a bit up from that and will be more carbohydrates. So I adjust it based on my activity. So I'm really just meeting what the body needs. And, I do go with that more intuitive feel as to what what is the body craving, provided I'm not sleep deprived, because I know if I'm sleep deprived, I'm going to be going towards sweet things. And, then I'll just sort of have a bit more water. And if I need sweet things, I'll have fruit. So that's pretty much how I work my day. So I've got a good amount of fruits. I have, fruit at breakfast. I'll have fruit as a snack. So I would have about 2 to 3 serves of fruit, sometimes actually more than that. I'd probably be having up to 4 serves of fruit a day because I have a lot at breakfast. I have at least 2 or 3 serves of fruit at breakfast. So maybe 3 or 4 serves of fruit a day. And vegetables, I would be certainly above the recommended advice from the government, which is around 5 serves of vegetables a day. I'm more that up to 10, I would say, of vegetables per day. So I'm constantly around that 10 serves. Carbohydrates, well, as I said, it all depends on my activity. I just adjust the carbohydrates based on my activity. I keep protein consistent. So I'm really looking to have at least 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. I weigh around 70 kilos. So I'm trying to aim for about 70 grams a day, and I'm probably between 60 and 70. So 70 is probably the top end. That's enough for me. I don't lift a huge amount of weights. I just, do enough to keep toned. And, but most of my exercise, I would say, is aerobic, with strength and conditioning in there as well. And also lighter. So I'll do lighter sessions. So I guess I'm jumping into the exercise pillar now. So I really go, I do have a schedule, and then So I have karate 3 days a week. I do running, and that varies depending on the kids' activities. And this is probably another key tip, is when I take my kids to sport, I either participate in the sport that they're doing, or I help run the session and I actually participate in the session. So I do get my activity sometimes through my kids' sport, or I just take the opportunity that, they're in a pool with an instructor. I will either do a swim myself, or I'll go and do a little run and, come back to pick them up. So I'm always working in with the kids' schedule, but I'm making it work. I'm not just sitting there on my phone watching the kids do laps. Of course, if that's what you want to do and that's important to you, then do that. But I'm certainly not mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, supposedly watching the kids swim laps or do their sport. But again, it's sometimes helpful because this could be social time to talk to other parents when their kids are doing sport. So I value that. That's important. So that's relationship building. I just find I do that elsewhere outside of when my kids are doing their sport, and I'm generally either participating or doing my exercise at the same time. But again, it's what works for you. You might find that that's a great time to connect with others and share stories. So my exercise, I'm always doing every day, between 30 minutes and 60 minutes per day. And it's based on how I'm feeling. Like I really go with how I'm feeling. As I said, I do have standards, but I'll lower those standards if my body is saying, no, you just don't have it today, Anthony. So I do work with my body. If I've done a lot of exercise and I'm feeling pretty run down, then I'll do lighter exercise, such as a real light swim or just some walking. I won't push myself. I do work with the body. And then, that gets to, I guess, relationships. I did touch on that before with the exercise. You can, tie the two in together. Yes, you can do it with someone else. You can do exercise with someone else, and you're doing relationships and exercise. But the important thing about relationships is when you're actually doing relationships, that you're actually present, okay? There's no point in sort of only half being in the conversation or sort of not wanting to be in the conversation. Set yourself standards. If you're going to socialize, do it well. Just like I said with exercise, go there and do it well. I will generally leave my phone behind. When it's relationship building, I'm all theirs, no phone, no distraction. And this is another thing in terms of regulating my stress and doing more mindfulness. I will have periods of the day where my mobile phone's not with me. When I'm exercising, it's nowhere to be seen. I will not take that thing exercising because it's going to compromise my exercise, just like it's nowhere near me when I'm sleeping because I know it will compromise my sleep, it being near me. I have a break from digital devices, and that's important. It's really important to be present. You need to get away from notifications. And you certainly want conversations to be notification free, okay? Just sit there, be totally present with that person. And, then you hear these things, oh, what if it's emergency or whatever? And, that emergency is like, what sort of probability is that occurring, right? I just got to have it for that, 1% of, or the chance that it may happen. Anyway, the news will get to you regardless. So, it's not me being naive or me being, or certainly judgmental. If you think that way, it's more just weighing up the probability of things occurring, right? So I think that person would unless you know that you're expecting a call for someone, and that's really important, then obviously have your phone, and have it available and accessible. But really, I think the best relationship building happens when you're without devices. And we did it for decades when we didn't have mobile phones. So I say, why can't we do it today? Like I lived in that generation where we didn't have any mobile devices and life worked. So don't think life can't work without a mobile phone. So think about it. That's all I'm asking you is consider device-free time. I certainly do it all day Sunday, most of the weekends, and I most of the time we'll do it when I'm, in meetings, and obviously creating content, it's off, it's gone. So it's really important to not have the distractions and to be totally present with what you're doing, whether it be exercise, whether you be with that person, whether you're doing your work. Be fully engaged, be immersed and embodied in what you are doing at that point in time. And that's another key thing that I wanted to share that I touched on earlier, is life isn't all about ticking the box. Yes, it's good to have ambitions and strive for it, but that's not what all life is about, okay? Life is about embodying experiences and being in the experience, like living it, so being present within that experience. It's not about chasing, one deadline after another and ticking off all those things on a page. It's nice. Yes, it does help to give us some guidance, but we shouldn't be rigid about it. Just like I said, I'm not rigid about, certain aspects of my routine. I'll be flexible because that's important. I'll allow important things to come in and disrupt my healthy or my wellness routine. But again, it is really important that we value, I guess, being in the moment as opposed to just thinking that I've got to be achieving that next thing and that's more important. And then we're constantly chasing and we're constantly missing life. We're constantly missing that experience, that embodiment. And you'll feel so much more fulfilled living the moment, being in it and enjoying it. And that's why, exercising without a mobile phone is great because I'm enjoying the exercise. I'm just engaged with doing what I'm doing. It's really fantastic. Same with when I'm doing any other form of exercise, not having that disruption. Same with conversations. It's so much more energizing, that conversation, when there's no distractions other than you're sitting with that person and hearing them and feeling them. So that's it. That is it for this episode. I hope you found it really helpful in some way. As I said, there may have been a little gem. Just go away and implement that one little gem. Be consistent. Once it becomes a habit, then you can take on something else. As I said, you can try some of these things. Some of these things may not work for you, and totally understand that because you're completely uniquely different to me, and that is great. That is another great thing about life, is how that we're so different. Imagine how boring this world would be if we all looked the same and were the same. That would be a very boring world. So embrace differences, embrace your differences, embrace your unique strengths, embody your experiences, be in the moment, prioritize your health, do it in a balanced way. So not just looking at diet and focusing only on diet, making sure you're doing these pillars that I talked about today. So that it's not just diet. It's also, you have a focus on sleep, you have focus on relationships, you have focus on exercise, you have focus on mindfulness, which is that downtime. So mindfulness is essentially just not doing anything. It really is. It's just being, okay? It's not doing, it's being. So I hope these tips have been useful. Please share the episode if you think you found it of value and it would be useful to someone else, because I really want to extend my reach to others and help as many people as possible. So share it, like it, leave a review. That will really help extending the reach of this podcast. I really enjoyed doing this episode. I hope you had the same satisfaction, and stay tuned for more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.